One of the more difficult challenges most people face when they decide to carry a handgun every day for self-defense is choosing the caliber of that handgun. There are quite a few common carry calibers available today, and most of them are very adequate. But adequate doesn't mean that they're equal. And because they are not equal, you have to make a decision of which round you personally are going to carry. Now, there are a lot of factors that come into play when choosing your caliber. Sometimes it just comes down to what kind of statement does your caliber make. You can decide to go the route of choosing a very powerful caliber, like .44 Magnum, and be prepared for everything from a mugging up to a bear attack, even if that bear comes prepared for a fight. But the negative side of that is you run the risk of letting everyone around you know that you have never been able to satisfy a sexual partner. Conversely, you could choose an adequate round like the 9mm and not have people questioning the size of your genitals, but the downside of that is you will constantly have to put up with your friends patting you on the back and congratulating you on coming out of the closet and finally living your own personal truth.
We are family.
So as you can see from those two examples, there are positives and negatives to different calibers. But one of the most important factors when choosing your carry round is going to be its overall capability. Now, if all handguns that you could choose from had the same capacity, choosing caliber would be easy. You would just go with the most powerful caliber you can handle. If you had fragile, frail wrists, you might go with something like a 9mm or even a .380. But if you're a man and your balls have actually dropped, or if you're a woman and you use a wallet chain and wear a lot of flannel, you would probably go with something like 10mm or .357 Magnum. But because all handguns are not the same capacity, you have to find some way to compare different numbers of one caliber to different numbers of another caliber. And up until now, that has been impossible. There's just been no way to possibly do it. But luckily, using all of my knowledge and experience as a self-proclaimed internet gun expert, have finally devised a simple method that people can use to compare different numbers of calibers to different numbers of other calibers and figure out which combination has the most overall capability. And I call it the Yankee Marshall Common Handgun Caliber Conversion Chart 9mm Common Denominator Method. As you can see, the way we compare the calibers is to take every individual caliber and convert it down to its worth in 9mm. That way we can take a gun no matter how many rounds it has or what caliber those rounds are and convert them to the common denominator, the 9mm round. Now I know some people right off the bat are going to start whining about why isn't this caliber on there or why isn't that caliber on there. These are the most common calibers. If you carry a caliber other than one of these calibers, you're just looking for attention, and I refuse to even acknowledge that you exist. It is not my fault that your daddy didn't hug you enough. So now that we have this caliber conversion chart, it will be easier than ever to choose your carry handgun. For example, say you're comparing two guns. One holds 18 rounds of 9mm. The other holds 11 rounds of .45 ACP. The .45 ACP is technically a superior overall round. But when you do the math on both guns, of course the 9mm gun is times 1, so it's still 18 rounds of 9mm, but each round of the .45 ACP is worth 1.3 9mm rounds, which gives you a total of 14.3 9mm rounds. Still, not enough to overcome the 18 rounds of 9mm in the other gun. So in this case, the 9mm gun would be the better choice. However, if you compared that same 9mm gun to a .45 ACP gun that holds 15 rounds, then the math is a little different. Of course, the 9mm gun is still 18 rounds of 9mm, but now the .45 ACP gun is equal to 19.5 9mm rounds. In this case, the .45 ACP gun is the better choice. It has the most potential. The extra oomph of the .45 ACP was enough to overcome the extra capacity of the 9mm gun. Now, some rounds are so powerful that it doesn't take a lot of them to overcome the greater capacity of other guns. For example, when you look at a gun that holds 6 rounds of .44 Magnum and compare it to the 15 rounds of .45 ACP, you get different results. The 15 .45 ACP rounds still equal out to 19.5 rounds, but the 6 .44 Magnum rounds equal out to 24 9mm rounds. In that case, the far fewer .44 Magnums still win. It's still a better choice because it is such a potent round. Now, this is a point where a lot of people are going to say, you just crafted this chart so .44 Magnum will always win because you like .44 Magnum. Well, I do like .44 Magnum, but math is math. Just because a round is more powerful doesn't mean it'll always win. For example, if you compare that same .44 Magnum gun to a 10mm gun that holds 16 rounds, well, we get a different result. The 6 .44 mags are still equivalent to 24 9mm rounds. But in this gun, since you have 16 rounds of 10mm, that equals out to 36 rounds of 9mm. The 10mm has a big advantage, at least when you just compare overall capability or overall potential of the two guns. Now, if you bring special circumstances into play, like, for example, that bear we mentioned earlier, then things are a little different. If you're actually attacked by an armored bear, you're likely only going to get off 1 or 2 shots, so you have to be able to make them count. You're going to want the more powerful round, which in this case would be the .44 Magnum. The .44 Magnum would be the better choice, even though it doesn't have as great overall potential as the other gun. It's just better for the circumstance. That being said, there are other factors other than just circumstance and capacity that need to be taken into account when comparing calibers. Sometimes when you're comparing two dissimilar guns of different capacities and different calibers, they will have drastically different barrel lengths. Barrel length does affect ballistics and therefore must be taken into account. In other words, as many of us, unfortunately, already know, regardless of what our mommies told us, size does matter. And that is why we have this little section in the bottom right-hand corner of the chart. As you can see here, if your gun has a barrel of less than 3 inches, you multiply that final number, that number of 9mm the gun is equivalent to, by a factor of 1. If the gun has a barrel of at least 3 inches but less than 6 inches, you multiply by a factor of 1.1. If the gun has a barrel of 6 inches or greater, then you multiply by a factor of 1.2. For example, if you once again look at a gun that holds 6 rounds of .44 Magnum and compare it to a gun that holds 10 rounds of 10mm, the .44 Magnum gun is still going to convert out to 24 rounds of 9mm, whereas the 10mm is going to convert to 22.5 9mm. The .44 Magnum is still the better choice here, but these two guns have very different barrel lengths. The .44 Magnum has a 4-inch barrel, meaning it gets multiplied by a factor of 1.1. That gives you 26.4 rounds of 9mm. When you look over here at the 10mm, in this case, this gun has a 6.3-inch barrel. That means you multiply that potential by a factor of 1.2. That means in the end, when everything is figured out, this gun has a potential equal to 27 rounds of 9mm. In this case, the 10mm with the 6.3-inch barrel would be the better choice. So now, as you can clearly see from these few simple examples, we finally, thanks to me, the Yankee Marshal, we finally have a foolproof and indisputable way to compare handguns of different calibers and capacities. And if you're someone that would like to say this method is not indisputable, let me remind you of one thing. I, the Yankee Marshal, am a self-appointed internet gun expert, and you likely are not, so you just need to shut your pie hole. That being said, I would just like to take this time to say you are welcome to everyone out there for creating this simple, easy to use comparison chart that is so simple that even people that appendix carry, and remember, these are people that think it's a good idea to point a loaded firearm at their penis all day, it is so simple that even they can use it.